This is the last chapter of the semester, and hopefully, I know, unfortunately for a lot of you, you're going to be graduating, and you're not going to have a big blow. Well, maybe you have a big blow up uptown. I don't know, but COVID is still here, and hopefully you're vaccinated and you're having a good time. Um, but anyway, your last quiz 5, will be over the last 4 chapters that we covered: 15, 16, 17, 18. Same format as all the other ones. And the only other assignment is your financial plan, which should be posted soon on Blackboard, if not already, depending on when you watch this. So those of you that are going to be financial planners, probably the number one area that you'll be focusing on is retirement planning. Those of you that are not going to be retirement planners, or financial planners, I should say, that doesn't mean you should tune this out, because this is what you should really be looking into, even at your age of 20 years old, if you're 20 years old. Because if you think about it now and you start planning now, it'll be so much easier for you when you get to be my age, in your 60s, your 70s, or your whatever. And it can just take a little bit of work right now, and you can really set yourself up to do well in your retirement age. So there's the learning objectives. You know, a lot of people think they know what retirement's going to be like, and a lot of times they're right, but there's some misconceptions about it. A lot of people think, hey, my expenses are going to go down when they retire. We'll look at that, see if that's the case. They think, you know, retirement's probably only lasts 15 years. It can often last a lot longer than that. My grandmother lived to be 100, and I think she retired in her 60s. A lot of people think that, hey, if I'm getting Social Security, that's going to pay for my retirement. And we've talked about this throughout the semester, and it'll maybe pay about 1/3 of your retirement. That's just my ballpark number here. It might pay some of your basic, it will pay some of your basic expenses, but it's not a retirement plan. We'll talk more about that. Your pension benefits, well, most of you will not have pension benefits. If you work for a state government like I do of OU, then you will get a little bit of pension. Probably your employer's health insurance will eventually run out, and there's plenty of time for me to start saving. Yeah, but the earlier you do, the better off you're going to be, and the less you're going to have to worry about it, the less headaches you will have as you sleep for your next 30, 40 years, okay? So anyway, just start saving as soon as possible. Good. Another thing to think about is just, we've talked about this before, your spending versus your income. Just make sure you're spending less than you make. I know that sounds pretty straightforward, but unfortunately a lot of Americans don't do that. I haven't done that sometimes. And then you can just kind of read through those right there. I'm not going to read them all to you. So the importance of starting early. If from age 25 to 65 you invested 300, I know you guys are wanting to fill in the blank, so there's your blank. Wait 10 years, wait 20 years, and insufficient. There are your blanks. But this is really an important, one of the more important slides, so I want you to think about this for a minute. For 40 years, you invest $300 a month, you get 9%. That's what the market has done. Then at age 65, you would have 1.4 million. Now, 1.4 million when you're 65 is not going to be anything like it is today, but still, it's a good chunk of change. And this isn't going up anytime either in the next 40 years. So $300 a month, but you have to start in your 20s. Okay? If you wait 10 years until you're 35 to start investing $300 a month, you're going to cut this number basically almost less than half. Okay, your 1.4 goes down to half a million. Okay? If you wait 20 years, which is what most Americans do, then you only have $20,000. I think that's right, $20,000. Now wait a minute, 20 years, $300. That should be, and that's why I have a space here. It should be a zero. That should be 200,000. Is that what I have? Yeah, I have that. Have that on your sheet there. On my PowerPoint, it got erased. On your sheet, it's 201. And people are spending 16 to 30 years in retirement. Okay? A pension, a private pension, which once again are very, very rare these days, and Social Security are often insufficient to cover the cost of living. So we've talked about power of compounding in Finance 3000, other classes. For every 10 years of delay before you start saving, you will need to save 3 times as much to catch up. That's why I keep stressing the importance of starting early. So here's an example of 2 girls. Now, you can go the safe route and put your money into a savings account, and you're not even going to get near 2% at the moment. You're going to maybe get like 1%. And Kelsey says, I really want to be safe with my money. I don't want to lose it. And so she puts her money in there, saves $500 a month. And then 40 years later, she has $365,000. But she can't retire because she doesn't have enough. Okay? So saving is not enough. Investing into like a target date fund, which means you put your money in there and says, okay, you're going to put it in there, has a target date of like 40 years from now when you retire, and it changes your investments from mostly stocks to kind of over into some bonds. And if it makes 10% a year, that's a little bit on the high end. There's no guarantee of any of these numbers, but that's probably historically about what they have done. She would have about $2.75 million. Okay? So they're both investing the exact same amount of money, except one is putting it into a savings account and one is investing it in the stock market. And look at the difference there. Kayla can now happily retire. Okay? Start early and invest. Okay, so let's analyze. This is the process you would go through if you're working with a client. You would look at their assets and liabilities, kind of like we've done with the Money Guide Pro. We haven't done it too much in that program, but you would kind of get an assessment with them, and you realize that probably their single biggest asset is their house. The problem is people want to stay in their house. They don't really want to sell it. So they could take advantage of that if they sold it, kind of downsized, and then had the difference between what they sold it for. Sometimes people that really don't want to move but have a large house worth a lot of money, it's all equity, they don't owe any money, they take out what's called a reverse annuity mortgage. And we've talked about this before, but just real quick, it means that an organization, a financial organization, would say, okay, you have a house that's worth $500,000. We will give you like $200,000 right now. We'll give you a check for $200,000. But when you die, we will get possession of the house to be able to sell it, to be able to get back any money that you've taken from us plus some interest. Okay? And then whatever the difference is, if there's money left over, that would go back to your heirs. So it's a way to take advantage of the equity that you have in your house, knowing that you're maybe not going to live a whole lot longer, and you can have some money without moving. So sometimes, remember we talked about a couple different types of life insurance, but like the whole life, universal life allows you to build up a cash value because it's been invested. And then sometimes you could take that lump sum amount and turn it into an annuity, which means that it's going to be kind of pay out as long as you live annually, or typically they do it, a lot of times they do it every month, but that could be going until you die. A lot of people don't realize this, but divorces get really messy financially, and so therefore, of course, your retirement assets are affected by divorce. It's very rarely a positive situation for anybody involved. One, you always have a lot of legal fees, and then everything gets split up. And I want you to think about the fact that when you're married, you kind of realize some economies of scale, to use business terms, which means you have two people living under one roof, one furnace, one kitchen, so on. If you had two people living separately, they have to both have kitchens, both have furnaces, both have roofs, and so on. So it's more expensive on a per person basis. So when you're married, um, you get a share in a lot of the costs, and a lot of times both people have incomes. Um, but when you're single, it just makes it a little bit more financially challenging. So when you get divorced, it just makes it a little bit harder. So pension benefits. So maybe you're the sole worker in the family, and you have some pension benefits. Depending on how long you've been married, that's considered marital property, and your spouse who maybe didn't work at all would be entitled to some portion of that. A lot of it just depends on how long you've been married as to what portion they would get. Depends on the state, things like that. So as you're walking through with your client, one of the big things you're gonna try to do is figure out what their retirement spending needs are gonna be. And this is kind of the misperceptions we talked about at the beginning. Some expenses may go down or stop altogether. So for example, work expenses, maybe you're not going to work anymore, you're not going to have to buy fancy clothes, maybe you pay off your house, you're not going to make as much money, so your taxes are going to go down. So there are a lot of expenses that will go down. However, there's some that may go up. You're going to have to pay more in insurance because you're getting older, you're just not as healthy as you used to be, so everything gets a little bit more expensive insurance-wise. Medical expenses go up. Maybe you're going to travel a lot more, so those would go up, and maybe you're going to give some more money maybe to your kids or something like that. So the key thing when we talk about retirement is figure out, where do you want to go? Where do you want to live? A lot of people say, I want to go someplace warm, or I just want to stay with the people I know, I like, I've been here all my life. Or this happens a lot. A lot of people, this is another reason why people go to Florida. It's because there's no state, not estate, but state taxes. So if they're making a lot of money in retirement, they don't want to pay as much tax to the state. In Ohio, it's whatever, 5% or 6%. So if you're really wealthy and you're making $1 million, it's $50,000 going to taxes that if you lived in Florida, you wouldn't have to pay necessarily. Sometimes it's climate, but anyway, something to think about. Then you have to consider all those costs when you want to move. But in terms of housing, 92% want to stay in their own home and just kind of die there. Now, that's preferred. It doesn't mean they always do that, but of course, most people are not going to say, hey, I really want to go to an old age home when I'm feeling down. So I just moved my mom from Florida to Arizona. She lives in an independent living facility now because my dad died a few years ago, and her health's not the greatest, so we moved her there. And yeah, she would much rather live in her house in Florida, but her health was getting bad. No family was there. She wouldn't live by my sister. So we moved her, and she'll probably be there for the rest of her life. Anyway, I'm not sure why I told you that. It just was on my mind because I just got done moving her. So figure out, once again, so we're still into planning your retirement income, planning your retirement. So figure out, where are you going to get this money? So one of the things I do for my mom, I guess we're talking about my mom, is I kind of manage her financial situation. So she gets money from Social Security, as like all of you will. Most of you will. Almost everybody does. There are certain circumstances where you get a little bit diminished amount. And then she has an amount of money that I've invested, and I try to make it so she gets dividends from stocks, that she gets interest from bonds, kind of get a well-rounded portfolio. And I use that money to make sure that she's able to pay for her independent living expenses, go out to eat some, whatever other expenses she may have, travel a little bit. And we set up a budget, tried to figure out what she needs to spend and how much she needs to do. Okay? So anyway, that's what you would do with your clients, and that's what all of you would need to do someday. I know when you're 20, you haven't even started working, and retirement is the last thing on your mind at the moment, which is fine for when it comes to some of this part. Once again, want to point out, really important to start saving for it. So, Social Security, as I said, is meant to be part of your retirement, not the sole source. If you download this PowerPoint, you can click on that link, or you can go to the, I think I gave you the HTML or the web address on your page there. One thing I didn't put on your sheet there says full retirement benefits at age 65 to age 67. The reason why I took the 65 off of your page at first, I thought, you know, for all of you, it's going to be 67 or maybe even higher. So I took the 65 off, and then I thought, you know, I should, for those of you that are doing financial planning, you're going to have clients that it may be 65. So that just means your benefits are not reduced at all. But you can take it out starting at 62 and get less money each month. You can also wait until you're like 70 and get a lot more each month. Okay, so the longer you postpone getting Social Security, the more money you would get, because they figure out kind of how long you're going to live and so on. So it works out well if you end up living longer than what they do. Okay? So you're going to have to pay tax on your Social Security. Your payments can be reduced if you're making a lot of money someplace else. That's kind of, you know, that doesn't, to me, that doesn't seem fair. If you've paid into it, you should get it out, regardless of how well you've done in other things, but that's another issue. Social Security typically goes up each year because of what we call it, you might see this someplace, a COLA, cost of living adjustment. Cost of living adjustment, that's what a COLA is. And that's usually like the same thing as inflation. Okay? So the government says inflation is about 2%, so we'll raise Social Security that amount. Okay? And sometimes you can get, if your spouse has Social Security and they die and you're still alive, you can get 1/2 of their benefit. A lot of people are concerned about the viability of Social Security and how long is it going to be around. The government estimate that like by 2033 it's going to be running out of funds, not going to be able to fund the future, which means it'll only be funded at 77%. So there'll still be money there, but it means that some serious thought needs to be given about how it's funded. And here's why. In 1945, there were 42 workers per retiree, meaning 42 people were working, contributing to Social Security, and only one person taking money out. This has worked out pretty well. Well, over time, as more people retire, there were in 2016 2.8 workers per retiree, and it's estimated that'll go down to 2.1. So you have fewer people putting money in, more people taking money out, people are living longer, so it just makes for kind of a bad system. So they either need to raise the tax rate that we all pay into it, or make some changes. So one of the changes they made was, hey, we're going to move the number from you can retire at 65 until you're 67, and things like that is what they'll do, and they'll probably just keep changing that. So other what we call public pension plans. So like Social Security is like kind of like a public pension, if you will. Employees covered under federal government retirement plans are not covered by Social Security. So for example, OU professors, we pay to the state teachers retirement system, and we don't pay into Social Security. So if that's all my job is working for OU, I wouldn't get any Social Security when I retired. I would get my money from the state that I've paid in, plus what they pay in. Now, fortunately, I've run a few different businesses, and I've paid into Social Security that way. So I will get some, but it will be reduced because of the fact that I'm getting money from the state. So I'm going to read from there. Big word here, very important word. Those of you that are going into financial planning, extremely important 2 words here: defined contribution and defined benefit. So 2 big types of plans, and it's also for all of you that are going to be working for a large corporation, you're going to potentially be able to invest in one of these two types of plans. So defined contribution. So think about define. It means you define how much you are going to contribute to the plan. So you say, okay, I'm going to put in whatever, $5,000 a year or a month or whatever it's going to be. Okay? And your employer puts in a defined amount. So this is typically what we call like a 401k. We've talked about this before. It's if any of you have the opportunity to invest in a 401k, it's like right up there with the top 3 things to do financially, because your employer will match a portion of the funds that you contribute. Typically it's like up to, for most of your salaries and rates that they contribute, it's maybe up to $3,000 to $5,000. And so sometimes they'll match dollar for dollar, sometimes they'll match 50%, up to a certain percentage of like your salary. But anyway, the point is, if you put in 5,000, they put in 5,000, you have just made 100% return on your money. Guaranteed, no risk. You got to take advantage of that. So anyway, that's what we call a defined contribution. All earnings grow without current taxation. So this is another big term, tax deferred. So when you put in, say, your $5,000, I say a year, and a month would be awesome, but there's no way you're going to be able to put that kind of money in. You're not even allowed to put that much money in. But say $5,000 a year. So if you're making $50,000, that's like 10% of your salary. Be great if you could do 20%. But anyway, put in $5,000 a year, and you do that every year, and hopefully you keep raising it. Each year, hopefully that money is going to increase in value, and you don't have to pay any income tax on it. If you were to put the $5,000 and you put it into Robinhood right now, just a regular account, any amount of money you made during the year by buying and selling stock, you're going to have to pay tax at the end of the year. So it takes away the amount of purchasing power you kind of have to put money into investments. So if it's in this retirement plan, that means taxes are deferred until you retire. Okay? So you can build up a much larger pool of money, and then you can take it out when possibly you're not making as much, so you have a lower rate. A defined benefit plan is when an employer will pay you a certain amount. So the benefits are defined. So with this plan, the defined contribution, what's defined is how much you put in. What is not defined is what you get out. What you get out is all based on how well the stock market does or whatever investments you put your money into. So you don't know with the defined contribution plan. With the defined benefit plan, which by the way, most plans are defined contribution because companies don't want to be liable to have to pay out a certain amount of money forever. So they say, okay, we just kind of do it depending on how much money you make. That's all you get. Defined benefit, employer makes investment decisions, but your benefit stays the same regardless. This is what's great, regardless of how the investment performs. So one nice thing, like say for me, for OU professors, for any teacher in like a public school in the United States, their retirement is based on 1, what their salary is, and 2, how many years they have put into the system. So each state's a little bit different. So the more years that I teach, the greater percentage of my like final salary that I will be able to get when I retire. I'll be able to get like that percentage until I die. So that's nice. I get a benefit. It's like a percentage of my salary until I die. So it has nothing to do with how well the stock market did or anything. So that's kind of a nice thing to have, and most companies don't have that though. Okay, so let's say you put your money in a 401k and you worked at Chase Bank and now you want to go work at Merrill Lynch, some other corporation. You can move your 401k from one employer to another. A lot of times you can just keep it there. But the thing, and this is a very important word, is vesting. Vesting means that, so let's just say you get hired by the firm, right out of college and they say, okay, we'll give you 401k and we'll match your whatever you put in. You put in 5,000, they put in 5,000. And then after 1 year you quit. They're probably not going to let you have that 5,000 even though they put it in there, because you are now what's called vested. Vested means that the employer says, look, they're doing this so that you will stay there with their firm because they're investing a lot of money in training you and so on. So what they'll typically have is a vesting plan over usually 3 to 5 years, which means that if you stay there for like 3 years, then you'll get, say, 50% of what they put in. If you stay for 4 years, 75%. You stay for 5 years, then you get all of it. So they're just trying to create some loyalty. So when you change jobs, you have some choices, and here's kind of here's like 4 different choices, and these I mentioned already some of these. You can just leave your money there. You can roll over, means kind of like transfer it from one fund to your new employer's plan. Sometimes you can take it out of a 401k and put it into an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. Same thing, tax deferred. Or you can just cash it out, but you're going to have to you'll have to pay taxes on anything you made, and you'll have to pay some sort of penalty tax to the government for taking it out. So the government's trying to really encourage us to save money. So I just mentioned this word, IRA. Stands for individual retirement accounts. If you cannot get a 401k, then you should do an IRA. Okay? It's kind of like a little statement. You can't do a 401k, do an IRA. The benefit with the 401k is that your employer puts money in along with you. The IRA is just you. And there's 2 ways, or 2 major IRAs. There's what we call the regular, typically the traditional, and you can put in, like right now, this is 2018, I think in 2020, I think it went up to $6,000. But anyway, it's around $6,000 is what you can contribute to an IRA. And many of you would be able to deduct it. So let's just say you made $50,000 and you put in $5,000 into an IRA, then your taxes are going to be based on $45,000. So you get a tax benefit right now, okay, with this plan. So your benefit is really right now, and then you don't have to pay any kind of taxes on any increases. The earnings accumulate tax-free until you start taking out. You pay taxes on the money as you withdraw it once you are retired. Okay? But you do get a benefit right now, and you get tax deferred on the other ones. A Roth IRA, and between the two, I think most financial planners would recommend someone for your age probably to just go with a Roth IRA. Your contributions are not tax deductible. So back to the 50,000, you put 5,000 in a Roth, and you still have to pay tax on 50,000. Okay, so it is not tax deductible. Okay, not tax deductible. But earnings also tax deferred, tax free, and then distributions are tax free if you you wait till you're 59 and a half. Okay, because you didn't get any tax benefit on the front end. So it's kind of like traditional. You kind of get a tax benefit in the front. Roth IRAs, you get tax benefit at the end. There are educational IRAs, typically referred to as the Coverdell. Allows you to give some money to each of your children, and the money can grow tax-free in that account, and that can be used to pay for college education. The SEP, I think stands for Simplified Employee Plan, and hence it said it's one of the simplest plans for self-employed. So it's kind of like a business IRA, if you will. And IRA withdrawals prior to age 59 and a half, you have to pay a 10% tax in addition to any income tax you would have made by making profits in that. Okay, so try not to want to take out your money from an IRA. Keogh plans are for self-employed people and their employees, and it's a little bit more complicated to SEP, but there are some more benefits, and we're not going to get into that. An annuity, a different type of product. Once again, talk about my mom. I bought my mom some annuities. The way they work is you give your whatever amount of money to a company. A lot of times they're insurance companies, and they will pay you out a monthly amount, flat amount. Well, sometimes it can change depending on what kind of annuity you get. But in my mom's case, a flat amount every month until you die. Now, if you die, then like 5 years after you've given them money, probably not the best investment. If you die longer than what your expected life expectancy is, then it's probably a good investment. The good thing is knowing that it's like a guaranteed income, so you don't have to worry about how the stock market is doing or anything like that. Okay. But probably should try to put your money in one of these other plans that I mentioned before anything else. So the last thing I just kind of want to go over this is just to show, okay, what are all the various sources of retirement, income, Social Security, we've talked about that, employer pension plans, personal plans, so here's would be all your IRAs, and here's your defined benefit plan, defined contribution plan. So it just kind of gives a well-rounded picture of really, so you should probably, you'll have money going into Social Security. Ideally, you could have one of these two, and then it'd be great if you could start your own IRA in addition to those. Okay, so that is it for retirement. That is it for the semester. I wish you all well. Remember that those of you that are going to be financial planners to take your SIE exam, it would be great if you could take that before you started interviewing, because it's really going to help you get that job or that internship, and you might even get a bonus. I know some students are getting bonuses if they have it in hand before they start work. Okay. So, and if you have any questions about personal finance after you graduate, whatever, feel free to give me a call or give me an email, send me an email. I'll be happy to try to help you if I can. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks for bearing with me through this whole COVID semester, and hopefully soon life will get back to kind of normal.